So good afternoon. My name is Chris Davies with Remax Commercial Capital. I'm joined by Luke Gervais, who is mostly going to stay off camera and just help coordinate questions and things. And we wanted to go through a webinar that I have called Killer Lists. And this is a presentation I've done in different forms for a couple of different groups, because everything that Luke and I do, and really everybody, just about every sales sphere that I can think of, has to deal with lists. I'm going to walk you guys through, for most of the clients that we deal with, you're in the business of buying and managing and selling residential rental real estate. Typically apartment buildings is what Luke and I do. But everybody that we work with is in the business of sales. You've got, investors you need to sell on a product. You have tenants you need to sell on a lease or a renewal. You have contractors that you might need to sell on a lower price. You have lenders you might need to sell on the particular loan they can do on a particular deal. So it's all sales, but more importantly, it's all follow-up and it's all marketing. I'll back up a second because I'm a person who, I'm not a serial entrepreneur by any stretch, but I do get to wear a lot of hats. I'm a big fan in our organization of saying that, I have a very particular set of precepts in my life, and there is an order to things, right? It's God, my wife, my family, and then everybody else. So that's my wife, Megan. That was the old picture the last time I did this, and now we have more kids. They keep multiplying. But I spend a lot of my time as a real estate broker. I also own apartment buildings and residential rentals, and invest with some other things as well. So what's the point of good lists? Why does this exist? I think the more interesting question is how you can take what we're doing today and make it actionable. Most people here are trying to find money or use their own money to buy properties and to manage them for the long term as residential rentals. Finding and nurturing investors and identifying those who are actually your best investors and marking them down as someone who is exceptional makes your life much simpler. 20% of the people that you know as investors will do 80% of your deals. The same thing is that off-market properties, when you can get a really great off-market, and I'll unpack the word off-market in a minute, off-market deal, or every so often you hit a home run. They never look like home runs on the front end. But when you're doing any sort of deal flow in any market, if you're flipping houses or buying apartment buildings or developing, you will start to identify those types of properties which are actually most profitable for you, not from a pro forma standpoint, but from a financial standpoint. And a lot of what we're talking about with lists and databasing actually have implications for accounting and a whole bunch of other business activities. The third part is retain great tenants. I actually think most of us dump it on our property manager and don't really think about it again. Or if we are doing it ourselves, we're not following up with tenants. I couldn't tell you the last time I talked to my tenant in the townhouse I own in Millwoods. I could tell you the last time I sent her a nice email because it was at Christmas and I did a video about it. But everybody else, I couldn't tell you what I did last year. So we'll start moving through that and unpacking it. The way I mostly think about list building, and I talk to lots of new investors and lots of new real estate brokers too, is you go to a networking event and someone gives you their card and you chat and you might find out that they own other rentals. As a broker, I want to know the address. My absolute favorite line to people who are joining the real estate industry as a professional, my goal in life is to find apartment building owners, and there's at least 3 or 4 on this webinar I recognize. They know I want to find out who you are, and I want to call you once a month until you're dead. And then I want to find your kids and call them once a month until I've sold all your real estate and you're not buying anymore. That's going a little far, but it's not that far from the truth. They might also be an investor. A lot of the groups I'm involved with right now, people are out there buying, but a lot of them are just as active investing in each other's deals. When you're compiling this information in a logical way, you're able to identify the patterns and figure out who the real movers are, and people can actually bring you what you need to make a particular deal or project work. Or they might be a private lender, and those are two different things, or at least for me they are, and I identify them differently in my database. But I have for sure a great big pile of cards with me right now. I always have a little bucket on my desk, and they're always, my assistant enters them into the database, we categorize them, we have follow-up plans, and it's a never-ending project. There is no perfect out-of-the-box follow-up plan today. A lot of it just comes down to every day taking a given number of actions to help cultivate the database. This sounds like sales and cold calling. It is, but it doesn't need to be. So what a normal pattern like this might be for a private investor is that you might have owners that you want to know. So every time you buy an apartment building, and I'm shooting myself in the foot here if you're in the Edmonton market, you should know every owner on your block, and the one across the street from you and the one across the alley from you. And you should call those owners every 90 days. And we have some suggestions for things you might say, but a lot of that is just to build relationship. And this really is building relationship in the truest sense. You're not there to try and shark a deal. You're there to help them and help yourself, help manage the problems in the neighborhood, find better trades, find better management teams. And you should also have a cycle above that that says every 12 or 24 months, make sure they still own it. Maybe check SPIN in Alberta or whatever title search in whatever jurisdiction you're in. Check the ownership records whenever you can. This is it. Like if you just followed this process for any single building you owned, you would probably buy one building every 5 years from just doing this. And if you're buying apartment buildings, I'll take $2 million every 5 years. That's a great way to just keep growing. If you're finding people who are investors and you're actively raising capital, at the bare minimum, I think you should be in touch with people every 45 days. Luke and I actually have a system for managing our investor buyer clients or owner clients, where I say that we actually have a book of 400 people. There's 100 people that you touch base with every month. And so you will touch base with them 12 times a year. And the other 3 people you will touch base with once a quarter. I don't care if it's every 35 or 40 or 60 or 90 or 200 days. Pick a pattern and stick to it. And no interaction as important as putting them on the phone for you. Private lenders are more interesting, and any of these different categories can be variable. Private lenders, in most people's situation, you talk to them when there's a deal. But especially when you're in the middle of a project, how often do you proactively reach out to your lender? Most of us keep our head down and pray they don't notice that we, had a cost overrun or something. Be proactive and check in with your lender. It not only will lead to better financing for you, but it will open interesting doors. Folks who are active in private lending often have a lot of different projects on the go, and when one goes sideways and they need someone they can trust to help pull them out of the fire, you're going to get that tap if you're more involved. Things that you can actually do when you get them on the phone. I always work hard to, when I call someone, bring them something of value. Tell them about a transaction in the market or a renovation I'm seeing someone doing, or something good, something helpful. But you can just call them and say, I really love your building. I'm next door to you. Would you like to sell? I say it so often I actually make it a joke, but you can direct ask them to transact, and you can do it every 30 days. I mean, Terry Pranich does this very famously, and I will call it, I'll call Terry and say, I'd love to sell this building of yours. He said, nope. And I'd say, great, I'll ask you again next month. And then we go on to talk about something else. I like sharing resources, particularly when it's something that has to do with the operation of their building. And I will take our database frequently when I'm on the road. And if I see a building that's got a problem, I will call the owner and say, your balconies look like hell, but this friend of mine just did their balconies. Would you like a contact? Or just tell them, here's what the guy paid. I'm also a huge fan. If you're not going to call them off for something that's helpful, call them and ask for help and turn that entire idea on its head. Call someone who just If you want to be really cheaty, so there was someone down the road from me in St. Albert who just did their siding, like they painted the stucco. And I just called them and said, I need to paint my building. Can I have your painter contact? What'd you pay? Did you like the work? People like feeling valued. So when you call them to ask for help, you're really turning, for me anyways, that realtor seller paradigm upside down, and I'm making them the powerful one instead of trying to be one up. Guys, can you help me with this problem I have because I've screwed it up? And then the next time I call, we can have a conversation that comes from a very different place. Building this database takes time, right? In multifamily, I waffled about showing these slides actually. In multifamily, I had a huge advantage, which is that we have been databasing this for a long time. Starting in the mid 90s, my dad went block by block and took all the buildings and literally took maps and highlighted them. And so I just picked a random stretch of 154th Street where we're doing a deal. These are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 buildings on that block of 154th Street. There's the tax record for 10006. There's the record for 010 and 0121. And you can tell by the old paper, we've carried this crap for a long time. It's now all digitized, it's updated. We've got ownership information on there. Some of these we want to farm, some of them we don't. And this actually comes from when Dad was looking for management clients. So I had a huge start, but there are lots of places to get databases. When I send listings out to people, I would hope that you put it in a binder or a spreadsheet or a database somewhere, because down the road, when you want to figure out what you're trying to buy, go for it. If you're doing greenfield, new infill development, get to know all your neighbors, figure out where the next lot is. If you're doing infill, get known on the street. It's just about getting the right information in. We even would pull old registries. Like, you know, there is no limit to how deep this database can go, especially when you start sending it out to Fiverr or whatever other group you want to use to make that process as cheap as possible. Having a database, or really what we're talking about here, are CRMs, customer relationship management software. These are the types of components that we roll into our database, and we've prioritized certain parts. Like, I don't track my tenant information. If I was doing commercial, like an office building, I would be tracking those lease expiries very closely because they take a long time to negotiate and to fill. I'm not really tracking potential joint venture partners, but I'm doing development, so I'm very much on top of land, contractors, other trades, and resources we need for that. We track listings with an incredible degree of specificity and all the sales information because it impacts that part of our business. And I maybe drop in the chat, if anybody runs a business outside of their real estate investing business, I'd love to see a couple examples of what other people are doing. I mean, we just went through COVID. If you're selling toilet paper, you would have a database somewhere of paper suppliers and, you know, representatives of different building chains. And you would be very diligent about keeping track of that. If you're running a property management company, you would keep a very clear list of the types of people that refer business to you. Are you actually following up with the owners? Like, how often do you call your owners? Not to discuss, you know, whatever's going on with their property, but to talk with them about what's going on in their market, to talk about who their friends are that they could refer to you. And preferably, you already have tracked which owners are the good ones and are sending you good people. So the good people will send you more good people. At the same time, and this applies to every business, my happiest day of the week is when I get to fire someone. Not the people who show up to events like this, but the people who are just continual time sucks and never do deals. We don't make those decisions arbitrarily in my team. We have clear numbers where if someone's just not doing it, we have a long list of transactions in history and data to let us know who's actually doing stuff and who's really treating these things as two-way relationships. So how do you actually get it done? There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tools that you can use. These are a couple that I've used personally, and new ones show up all the time. So we use Salesforce within our office, and it's a commercial real estate specific version of Salesforce, but it lets me hold all the data I need, all the building database, and I'll show you a little bit of how that actually works and how you can turbocharge this. I've used Keep and HubSpot before in different ways. They're both nice because they have free versions. Salesforce, for the way we use it, costs me about $1,000, probably more, 1,500 Canadian per user per year. We've got 3 people on the team, 3 or 4 grand a year in just software before we get to the other info. You can make this work if you're just a pure database person using a tool like Microsoft Access. I also like another free tool called Airtable because it lets you link between records. Excel is not on this list. Excel is not good enough. If you want to do this in Excel, you might as well actually bust out like a card catalog the old school way, because you could do it with the card catalog and binders. My dad and my grandpa used to. Now, the one other one that has changed a lot since I first started really focusing on my CRM are some of the mail marketing tools. So something like MailChimp will let you do a lot of this and automate a lot of it when it comes to email. And then again, platforms like MailChimp will let you do direct mail and texting and a lot of the follow-up. You kind of have to hack it to go backwards to make it really do sales and to work on individual reactions or individual transactions. But those are all things that will really like get the entire process moving along. The thing that I've come to realize, and I'm going to show you something straight out of my book, is no matter what business you're in, you have to decide what your critical success event is. So for me, as a commercial real estate broker, that's finding someone who owns an apartment building, getting them to sit down, decide to list it with me, find a buyer for it, and sell it. But it starts with finding that owner and getting them to sit down. So I have a little notebook, like as much as I'm on the computer all day long, I take a lot of my notes longhand. And this little sticky note that I put on every page starts with number of dials attempted, and then numbers of dials completed, and then number of meetings scheduled and held. That's my most important thing I do all day. Call an owner, sit down, see if we can get their building on the market. If you're out there raising money to do a project, I mean, finding projects are important. Raising money is also important. Whatever you think you need to do to get that deal done, set yourself a metric, set a benchmark, 5 calls a day, 10 calls a day. Don't rely on social media or email or less responsive things. Don't be afraid of the phone. Those are calls, those are interactions where you get immediate feedback. And your phone call can be just to set up a meeting or to say, I'm about to email or I just emailed you something. But don't be afraid of that. More importantly, whether it's phone calls or texts or emails or Facebooks or TikTok, whatever, track it. Because the things that get tracked are the things that get done, and you can follow what's actually working. I mean, if just text works for you and you can compare how many people you called versus how many people you just texted, the numbers will tell you what actually works. I will guarantee you that the phone will be the most effective way to actually get the money in your hands. That's my soapbox for the day. That's a very quick look at how I take someone's business card or someone's address and expand it out into a database that we keep growing from, and how we use those types of records to go back and find buildings to sell, find investors, find buyers, and keep in touch with them, and some tools that we think are helpful. I hope you guys found that helpful.